Story 1. At night, the hallway in my house gets longer, and it knows when I notice. I've lived in this house for 6 years. It's long enough to know every single creak in the floorboards. It's long enough to recognize which pipes knock when winter sets in. It's long enough to walk through it in the complete dark without turning on a single light. That's exactly why I noticed immediately when the hallway changed. It wasn't dramatic. It's not in a way I could point to and say that's wrong. It was subtle. The hallway between my bedroom and the living room just felt longer than it should have. At first, I blamed fatigue. You don't really measure distances when you're tired. You feel them, and feelings are unreliable. They're elastic, easily influenced by stress, or routine, or expectation. I told myself that. I just kept walking. One night, I was walking from my bedroom to the kitchen for a glass of water, and I counted my steps without even meaning to. 23. That was normal. I'd counted them before a long time ago, back when I first moved in. 23 steps every single time. The next night, I did it again. 24. I stopped right in the middle of the hallway. Walls looked exactly the same. The framed photos on them hadn't moved an inch. The light switch was still exactly where it should be, but something felt stretched. It was like the space between point A and point B had been quietly, secretly edited. People always ask why I didn't just grab a tape measure, why I didn't take a picture or mark the floor with tape to prove it. The answer is simple. The hallway only changed at night. During the day, it was perfectly normal, rigid, unremarkable. It behaved. But at night, after the house settled and the lights were off, it became something else. And deep down, I knew that measuring it would be an acknowledgement. An acknowledgement felt dangerous. On the fourth night, I made a mistake. I stopped halfway down the hallway, and I said out loud, "This isn't right." The lights flickered. Not off, not on. Just a brief, sharp stutter like the house itself had blinked. The air grew heavier. The hallway didn't change immediately, but when I reached the living room and turned around, the distance back to my bedroom felt significantly longer than the walk I'd just taken. That was the night I heard something behind me as I walked. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't breathing. It was just a shifting presence. The sound of fabric sliding against fabric. I sped up. The sound matched my pace perfectly. When I stopped, it stopped. When I spun around, the hallway was empty. But the distance back to my bedroom had grown again. The walls of my hallway are lined with photos. Family, friends, old vacations. I started noticing changes there too. Not new photos, but subtle distortions. Faces had become slightly blurred. Eyes weren't quite aligned. Smiles felt like they were held a fraction of a second too long. One night I paused in front of a photo of myself. The version of me in that frame looked tired. Not in the way people normally look tired in photos. In the way people look after they've been walking for a very, very long time. Then, the first rule appeared. It was written in marker on the inside of my bedroom door. I didn't write it. I know my own handwriting. This wasn't it. It said, "Do not stop in the hallway after midnight." My heart pounded as I read it. I checked the time. It was 12:11 a.m. I hadn't stopped. Not yet. But I learned what happens if you do. Anyway, it was an accident. I was walking down the hall and my phone slipped out of my hand. I bent down to pick it up just for a second. The hallway responded immediately. The walls didn't move. The floor didn't stretch. But the light at the end of the hall, the living room, suddenly felt much, much further away. As if the very space between us had thickened. I straightened up and walked as fast as I could. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time I reached the living room, my legs were burning. When I turned back to look, the hallway was longer than I had ever seen it. The next night, another message appeared. This one was taped to the wall halfway down the hall. It read, "Do not turn around." I swallowed hard. Turning around had become a habit. It was a reassurance, a way to confirm that nothing was following me. But the note suggested that maybe something was. The night it truly changed, I knew immediately. The air smelled wrong. It was damp, stale. It's like a place that never received sunlight. I stepped into the hallway and froze. The walls were further apart. Not by much, but enough to notice. The ceiling felt higher too, and the far end of the living room was no longer fully visible. It just faded into shadow long before it should have. I started walking. I counted my steps. 23, 24, 25. I didn't stop counting. 30, 40. My breathing quickened. The photos on the walls were no longer familiar. Some of them showed rooms I didn't recognize at all. Others showed people I knew, but they were standing in this hallway, looking directly toward the camera, toward me. The sound behind me returned. It was closer this time. I could feel it now, not physically, but spatially. It was like a pressure building behind my back, as if the hallway itself was folding around something that walked just out of sight. I fought the urge to turn around.
Ow.
The rule echoed in my mind: do not turn around. That's when the realization hit me, mid-step. The hallway wasn't just growing, it was making room. Not for me, for something else. Something that needed space, needed distance, needed time. Every single step I took fed it. Every hesitation gave it more leverage. The third rule appeared written directly on the floor. The letters were dark and slightly raised, as if they'd been pressed into the wood from beneath. It said, "Do not reach the end." My heart slammed against my ribs. The living room light flickered far ahead. It was so far away now, unrealistically distant. I stopped walking. The pressure behind me intensified. The hallway did not like that. A voice that wasn't a voice spoke in my head. I didn't need to speak aloud. The understanding just arrived, fully formed. If you reach the end, you won't come back the same. If you turn around, you won't come back at all. And if you stop, you become part of the distance. I took another shaky step, then another. Halfway down this impossible hallway where there should have been nothing but walleye, past a new photo frame. Inside was a picture of me, standing in the hallway. I looked older, thinner. My eyes were hollow. I was just walking. The timestamp on the photo read 3:41 a.m. The current time was 12:39. The walls began to expand with each step I took, in and out, like they were breathing. The sound behind me grew louder, not footsteps, but the sound of something large moving through space. I felt it brushing close enough to distort the air around me. I could almost feel its shape. Almost. I understood then. Hallway wasn't a passage. It was a filter. Something passed through here. Something used walkers people like me to pull itself closer to our world. The longer you walked, the more of it followed you. So I broke the rules. All of them. I stopped. I turned around. And I ran. The hallway screamed. Not in sound, but in pure resistance. The walls snapped inward. The floor lurched. Something enormous surged forward from the darkness behind me. But the distance was collapsing faster than it could adjust. I threw myself back into my bedroom and slammed the door shut. The hallway went silent. Normal. 23 steps long. The rules disappeared. The photos returned to normal. The hallway behaves now. Mostly, but sometimes late at night, when I walk past my bedroom door, I swear I see the corridor stretch, just slightly. As if it's remembering, as if it's waiting. I sleep with my bedroom door closed now. I avoid midnight trips to the kitchen. I don't count my steps anymore, because some spaces aren't meant to be crossed over and over again. They aren't meant to be noticed. And if a hallway in your home ever starts feeling longer than it should, stop walking. Because it may not be trying to lead you somewhere. It may be trying to bring something back with you. Story 2. Every night at 2:17 a.m., someone sits on the edge of my bed. It started with the time. Not the presence, not the feeling, just the time. 2:17 a.m. every single night, my eyes would snap open. No alarm, no noise, just this quiet awareness pulling me from sleep like a hand gently but firmly lifting my head. At first, I dismissed it as stress. I'd glance at my phone, see the time, roll over, and try to force myself back into my dreams. But the body remembers patterns long before the mind catches up. Soon, my body started waking before my eyes did. I would be lying there perfectly still, knowing the clock read 2:17. The first night I felt it, I froze. My mattress dipped. It wasn't sudden or violent. It was slow, careful, like someone was cautiously sitting down, testing their weight, trying not to wake me. My breath hitched in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, telling myself it was sleep paralysis. Then I told myself it was just my cat. I tried to convince myself it was anything except what my gut was screaming at me. The mattress shifted again, this time closer to my legs. People always say what they'd do in a situation like this. They'd scream, they'd jump up, they'd fight. But they're lying. When your brain is caught between sleep and absolute terror, you don't react with bravery. You react with self-preservation. And the best way to preserve yourself is to go unnoticed. So I stayed completely still. I focused on counting my breaths, shallow and quiet, and I waited for the weight to lift. It didn't. One night is an anomaly. 2 nights is a coincidence. But 5 nights in a row? That's a routine. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the mattress would dip. Always the same amount of pressure. Always in the same spot at the foot of my bed. Always slow, never rushed. It was never heavy enough to feel threatening, just enough to be a constant, chilling reminder that I was not alone. On the 6th night, something new arrived. Smell. It was faint at first, then stronger. It was an old smell, like dust and cold fabric that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. It was the scent of a place that had been abandoned while someone was still inside it. It didn't belong in my modern, clean bedroom. It didn't belong anywhere in this century. The 7th night, I heard it. It wasn't loud or even rhythmic. It was just a subtle disturbance in the air, a presence that inhaled without lungs and exhaled without warmth. Human breathing has texture, a certain rise and fall. This was different. It was a hollow, empty sound that made the silence feel even heavier. That's when I found the first rule. It was written in the Notes app on my phone. I have no memory of typing it. The note was time-stamped to 18 a.m. It said, "Do not acknowledge I." Till my blood ran cold. Because in that moment, just by reading it, I realized I already had. The next night, I dared to open my eyes. Just a sliver enough to see the indentation on the mattress in the dim light. The shape was all wrong. It wasn't formed by legs or hips. It wasn't any human proportion I could recognize. It was just a deep depression that suggested something was approximating a seated posture. The air around it felt dense, heavy, like gravity itself was leaning harder right there. I snapped my eyes shut immediately. The mattress creaked softly. The weight shifted. Closer to my torso. Then, it started learning. Began to synchronize with me. Every time I inhaled, the pressure beside me would adjust. Every time I exhaled, it would lean in. It was testing, matching, mirroring my very existence. It was learning me. I held my breath for just a moment. The entire room seemed to hold its breath too. A second note appeared on my phone. Again, I had no memory of writing it. Do not speak. This one was time-stamped earlier. 2:16 a.m. It was as if some part of me was anticipating what was coming next. It communicated without making a sound. The understanding just arrived in my head, fully formed and completely unwanted. You notice me now? The mattress creaked again as the weight leaned even closer. You're doing well, the thought continued, almost gentle. Most people panic. It showed me fragments, not like visions or hallucinations, but like flashes of understanding. It showed me the moments when people are at their most vulnerable. The split second between waking and sleeping, the tiny pause between breaths. The instant before a thought becomes a decision. That's where it lived. Not fully here, but not fully gone either. Just waiting. The third rule wasn't on my phone. This time it was written on a piece of paper on my nightstand. The handwriting looked almost like mine, but slower, more deliberate, as if each letter was a monumental effort. It said, "Do not let I'd finish sitting." My heart hammered against my ribs because I suddenly understood. All this time, the weight had never fully settled. It had always been adjusting, shifting, waiting for something. That night, it almost did. The mattress dipped further than it ever had before. The bed frame groaned under the strain. The sheets pulled tight around my legs, trapping me. The weight pressed down, firm, complete, satisfied. I gasped for air. But the room felt wrong, thicker, smaller, as if the space itself had just been claimed. A thought whispered in my mind, a chilling sense of finality. There, that's better. I finally understood what it was doing. It wasn't watching me. It wasn't feeding on my fear or haunting me in the traditional sense. It was practicing. It was learning how to exist fully in our world, using my bed as an anchor point and my awareness as its permission slip. Then it gave me a choice. I can stay, the thought said, almost kindly. Or I can sit somewhere else. A wave of terror and responsibility washed over me. I shook my head violently. No, I whispered into the darkness. The moment the word left my mouth, the pressure intensified. The bed creaked violently. The walls of my room seemed to lean inward, suffocating me. The rules vanished. They were gone. The air grew ice cold, and the weight shifted completely, pressing down beside my ribs. It wasn't touching my skin, but it was occupying the space, claiming it as its own. Then I stay, it concluded. I did the only thing I could think of. The one thing that didn't belong in this ritual of fear. I laughed. It was a weak, pathetic sound, but it was laughter. The weight paused, as if confused. Laughter broke the pattern. Didn't fit the script. With a surge of adrenaline, I rolled onto my side, disrupting the space it occupied. The mattress snapped back into place. The room exhaled, and the presence withdrew. Slowly, reluctantly. It didn't come back the next night or the night after that. The notes were gone. The old, dusty smell faded away. But sometimes, when I lie awake around 2:17 a.m., I feel a faint phantom pressure beside me. A subtle dip in the mattress as if something is considering whether it still fits. I never sleep in total silence anymore. I keep a fan running. I play music, anything to fill the gaps, because silence is an invitation. And some things don't need a door to get in. They just need a little bit of space. So if you ever wake up at the same time every night, if your bed feels occupied, if the mattress dips slowly beside you, don't move, don't speak, and whatever you do, don't let it finish sitting down. Thanks for listening. If this story chilled you, be sure to subscribe for more. Story 3. I worked the night shift at a hotel that isn't on any map. I wasn't desperate when I took the job. It's important to understand. I wasn't running from debt or eviction or some dramatic turning point in my life. I just wanted quieter work. Something overnight. Something predictable. The listing was simple, almost comically so. Night desk clerk, small hotel, cash pay, no experience required. That was it. No hotel name, no address, just a phone number. So I called. The man who answered didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask for my name or my resume, just asked one single strange question. Can you stay awake? I said yes. He told me to start that night. Simple as that. Of course, I tried looking up the hotel before my shift. I'm not completely reckless, but there was nothing. No website, no reviews, not even a single blurry picture on Street View. The address he gave me existed technically, but the map just showed a long, empty stretch of road bordered by dense trees on both sides. I figured it was just newly opened or maybe so old it had fallen off the digital map. Well, I drove out there just before 10 p.m. The road felt longer than it should have, stretching on into the darkness. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches like crooked fingers, as if they were listening, waiting. Then, the hotel just appeared, out of nowhere. No sign, no welcoming lights visible from a distance. Just a 3-story building that looked undecided. Wasn't abandoned, but it wasn't exactly maintained either. It was like the entire place existed in a state of permanent pause. Parking lot was completely empty except for my car. When I stepped inside, the air was strange. It smelled stale, but also clean, like fresh linens that had been sealed in a plastic bag for decades. A man stood behind the front desk. It was the same voice from the phone. Without a word, he slid a single key toward me. "Room 001, he said. "Desk is yours from 10 to 6. I hesitated. "What about guests?" I asked. He paused for a long moment, looking right through me. "You'll know if one arrives." Then he just turned and left through a door behind the desk. I never saw him again. Alone in the silent lobby, I noticed a notebook on the counter. It was old, leather-bound, with handwritten entries. There was no title. I opened it to the first page, which read Night Desk Rules. Rule 1. Do not leave the desk between 12 a.m. and 3 o'clock a.m. Rule 2. If the service bell rings once, ignore it. Rule 3. If it rings twice, look up. Rule 4. If it rings 3 times, do not look at the guest. I laughed. It was a nervous, shaky laugh. I thought it had to be a joke, you know? Some weird attempt at creating a spooky atmosphere for a new theme hotel. I would come to regret that assumption more than anything. The first hour was absolute silence. Nothing happened. No guests, no phone calls. The hotel was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like the entire building was holding its breath waiting. At 11:04 p.m., the little silver bell on the counter rang. Ding, just once. My heart jumped into my throat. The first rule flashed in my mind, ignore it, so I did. I just sat there, my eyes glued to the security monitor, pretending I heard nothing. Then, at 11:27 p.m., it rang again. Ding ding. Twice. My hands were shaking, but I followed the rule. I looked up. A man was standing in the lobby. I hadn't heard the front door open at all. He wore clothing that was completely out of date. Long, heavy coat and perfectly polished shoes. Far too formal for a modern traveler. His face was incomplete. Not that it was missing features, but the proportions were all wrong, subtly distorted, like a portrait painted by an artist who could unquite remember what a person was supposed to look like. He smiled politely, a thin, stretched smile. "Good evening," he said. "You have vacancy?" "Yes," I replied automatically. The open notebook was staring up at me from the desk. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Welcome," I corrected myself, trying to sound normal. "May I have your name?" He gave me a name, and I swear I immediately forgot it. As soon as I wrote it down in the logbook, the ink seemed to blur, the letters twisting into an unreadable smudge. He took his key for room 214 and walked toward the elevator. As he moved away, I noticed something deeply unsettling. His footsteps made no sound at all on the tiled floor. After midnight, the hotel itself began to change. The lights dimmed on their own, without any flicker or hum. The air grew heavier, thicker. I glanced at my watch. The hands had stopped moving. The big clock behind the desk was still ticking, but the sound was inconsistent, speeding up and then slowing down, as if time itself was becoming unreliable. At 12:03 a.m., the bell rang. Ding. Then a second later, ding. And a third, ding. 3 times. The rule was clear. Do not look up. I stared down at the desk, forcing myself to focus on the grain of the dark wood, on the scratches and imperfections. I could feel a presence standing across from me. I could sense its weight, its stillness. "Room," a voice said softly. It wasn't demanding or angry, it was just expectant. My mind raced. What was I supposed to do? The rules didn't cover this. I slid a random key across the counter without lifting my head. "Which room?" the voice asked, just as softly as before. I froze, my throat tight with panic. Before I could even think, the voice continued. "Any," it said. "It's just not 37. I don't know why I did it, but my eyes darted to the bank of security monitors. Most of them were just static, but the hallway camera for the 3rd floor. For room 37 was active, even though the screen said no signal, and something was moving in front of that door. Shadowy figure, not entering, not leaving, just waiting. I quickly grabbed a different key and slid it across the counter. The unseen presence took it. As it left, the bell rang once more. Single, soft chime. Then, silence returned. After that, the guests came steadily, not constantly, but with a strange, unnerving consistency. Some looked human enough at a glance. Others did not. I learned quickly that none of them cast a reflection in the large, ornate lobby mirror, and none of them ever blinked. They all asked the same sorts of questions. Do people stay long here? What floor am I on? What happens if I forget my room number? I answered as carefully as I could. The notebook became my lifeline, and the strangest part, it seemed to update itself. I'd look down, and new rules would have appeared, written in that same spidery handwriting. Do not confirm memories. Do not contradict a guest's version of events. If a guest claims they never arrived, apologize. At 1:48 a.m., someone screamed. It wasn't loud or distant. It was close and horribly contained, as if it had been trapped inside the very walls of the building. The sound came from above, from the direction of room 37. The camera for that hallway flickered violently. For a second, I saw the shadowy movement outside the doorstop. Then the screaming ended just as abruptly as it began. I looked down at the notebook. A new rule was there. If you hear screaming, do not investigate. 2:11 a.m., the bell rang twice. I looked up. A woman stood there. I knew her, not personally, but intimately. She had my mother's soft voice, my ex-girlfriend's posture, the way she held her shoulders, and she had my eyes. My own tired, frightened eyes stared back at me. "You work here now?" she asked, her voice filled with a gentle sadness. I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. She smiled. "You always end up in places like this." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get a key from the rack. I slid it toward her, but she didn't take it. "Do you remember how you got here?" she asked. I couldn't answer. I didn't know the answer. She nodded as if she understood completely. "Neither do I." And then she just turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the lobby without a room. The notebook added another line, fresh ink on the page. "Do not follow familiar guests." I found his name by accident, the last clerk. It was written faintly on the inside cover of the notebook, indented so deeply into the paper it was almost carved there. Then I saw it again and again in the guest log. The same name, assigned to dozens of different rooms in different handwriting over and over. And then, at the end of the list, the handwriting changed. It was mine. At 2:59 a.m., just 1 minute before the bewitching hour ended, the power flickered. For a single terrifying second, the camera for room 37 turned on fully, a clear picture. The door was wide open, and inside was the front desk. My desk. And there was me, standing there looking exhausted and lost, just waiting. A new rule appeared on the page in front of me, the letters forming slowly, one by one. Room 37 is the checkout. At precisely 3 a.m., a loud clank echoed through the lobby as the front doors locked automatically. 8. The flow of guests stopped. The entire building settled into a new kind of silence. And in that moment, I understood. The hotel didn't host travelers. It hosted transitions. It was a place for moments caught between one life and the next, for people who didn't know where they belonged yet. And someone had to be here to keep them from wandering off. Someone had to stay awake. The man from the phone call appeared from the back room as silently as he had left. "You're doing well," he said, his voice calm. "Do I get to leave?" I asked, my own voice barely a whisper. Smiled a thin, knowing smile. Eventually, he gestured toward the old elevator at the far end of the lobby. "Oh, day shift is upstairs." The elevator only had one button. I didn't take the elevator. I'm still here, still working nights, still following the rules in the book, and sometimes writing new ones of my own, because I've learned something truly terrifying. If I leave this desk unattended, the guests start assigning themselves rooms. Trust me, no one survives that. So if you ever find yourself driving down a road that feels too long, that goes on and on into the night, if you see a hotel that doesn't appear on your phone, a place that looks like it's waiting just for you, turn around. Just turn around and drive away, because some places aren't destinations. They're holding patterns. Someone always has to work the night shift. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe for more. Stay safe out there. Story 4. Everyone in my apartment building leaves at night, except the ones who knock on my door. The building was quiet, that's why I moved in. It should have been my first warning. 10 floors, almost 50 units, prime location, and the rent was suspiciously low. When I toured the place, the leasing agent smiled too often and said too little. She showed me my unit, handed me the keys, and said only one thing that stuck with me. Most residents work nights. That explained the silence, or so I thought. The first week passed normally. I unpacked, learned which floorboards creaked, and memorized the elevator's strange delay between the 5th and 6th floors. It wasn't until the 8th night that I noticed it. At exactly 11:58 p.m., doors began to open, all around me. Soft clicks. The sound of deadbolts sliding back, hinges whispering. I cracked my door and peered into the hallway. Residents were emerging, one by one. They weren't talking. They weren't acknowledging each other. They just moved toward the elevators and stairwells in an orderly, silent procession, like commuters who had done this 1,000 times. By 12:03 a.m., the hallway was empty. Every door was closed. Every light was dimmed, except mine. I thought about following them. I really did. But something about the way they avoided eye contact was unsettling. It wasn't fear I saw in their faces, it was resignation, as if whatever waited for them outside was preferable to staying inside. So I stayed. I locked my door, triple-checked the deadbolt, and watched through the peephole. For a long time, nothing happened. Not that night, anyway. Then came the knock. Out. It was soft, polite. 3 gentle taps on my door. It froze. I hadn't heard anyone return. I checked the time, 12:17 a.m. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. The knock came again. This time it felt like it was just inches from my ear. "Hello?" a voice said. It wasn't muffled, wasn't distorted by the door. It was crystal clear, as if the person were standing right next to me. "Are you new?" I held my breath, not daring to make a sound. "You left your light on," the voice continued, its tone unnervingly gentle. "That's not safe." My heart was hammering against my ribs. I whispered, my voice barely audible, "Who is this?" There was a long pause. Then the voice calmly replied, "Someone who stayed." When I woke the next morning, my heart still racing, there was a note taped to the outside of my door. The handwriting was unfamiliar. There was no signature. It was just one sentence. "They will come back. Do not answer." My hands were shaking as I pulled the tape free. I glanced down the hallway. Every door was shut, just like always. It was as if nothing had ever happened. The second night it started again, 11:58 p.m. Doors opened. Residents emerged. This time, I stayed inside, pressing my ear against the shared wall. No conversation. No footsteps once they reached the stairs. Just the unnerving sound of people leaving. At 12:12 a.m., the knocking began, but it wasn't just on my door. I could hear it echo down the hallway, moving from one door to another, slow, methodical, as if someone were checking which units were still occupied. I realized the knocking wasn't random. It skipped the apartments of those who had left. It only stopped at doors where the lights were still on, only where someone remained. When the presence reached my door, there was no knock, just a feeling. A heavy stillness. I felt it standing there on the other side of the wood, waiting. Another note slid under my door before morning, and another the following night. Soon I had 5 of them, spread out on my coffee table like a set of grim instructions. They formed a pattern, a list of rules for survival. 1. Do not open the door after midnight. 2. Do not respond to voices in the hallway. 3. Do not turn off all lights. 4. Do not pretend to be asleep. And the 5th, the one that chilled me the most, do not invite anything inside, even in thought. On the 6th night, someone stayed behind. I saw him through the peephole. A man in his 30s pacing anxiously in the hallway, checking his phone over and over. At 12:01 a.m., the elevator doors closed without him. A look of pure panic crossed his face. He rushed to a neighbor's door and knocked frantically. No answer. Then he came to mine. "Please," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I was just late. I'll go with you tomorrow. Just let me in." I didn't move. Behind him, the hallway lights began to flicker. The air grew cold. Something shifted in the shadows at the far end of the corridor, a distortion in the space. The man slowly turned to look. I never heard him scream. I never saw him again. The truth arrived gradually, pieced together from the notes and the nightly terror. The building wasn't empty at night. It was exchanging occupants. Those who left came back changed, a little less themselves each time, and those who stayed. They were processed. The knocking wasn't from outsiders trying to get in. It was from the residents who had returned. Over time, the knocking learned. It grew more confident, more specific. It began to mimic familiar rhythms. The quick 3-tap knock my best friend always used. The slow, patient knock of my mother. One night, it tapped out the rhythm of my own name. I just cried silently on the floor, my hands clamped over my ears as the door trembled gently, patiently.
Ow.
Then, something new happened.
Odd.
Unit 804, the apartment directly across the hall from mine, had been empty since I moved in. Night I looked through the peephole and saw its door was wide open. The lights were on. Inside, the apartment looked exactly like mine. The same furniture, the same layout. I could even see the same small crack in the wall by the window. And on the table, there was a single note. I could read it even from my doorway. You can switch places. Once I didn't take the offer, but I watched. Through the peephole, through the cracks, through the warped reflections in the hallway fixtures. I saw what happened to those who finally gave in and opened their doors. They didn't disappear. They just stepped aside. They let something pass through them, something that wore their shape poorly, like an ill-fitting suit. Something that then stayed in their place. I finally understood why they all left. Leaving wasn't an escape. It was maintenance. Constant movement, the nightly exodus, was what kept them intact. Staying inside for too long made the building forget you, and forgotten residents were replaced. It was exhaustion that finally got me. One night I was just too tired to move, too tired to care. At 11:58 p.m., I heard the doors open. Mine stayed shut. The hallway emptied. At 12:14 a.m., the knock came. It was harder this time, more insistent. "You've stayed long enough," a voice said. It sounded exactly like me. In that moment of pure terror, a final note appeared. Not under the door, not taped to the outside. It was on my wall, the words seeming to bleed out of the plaster itself. It said, "If you cannot leave, hide who you are." I scrambled through the apartment, turning off anything personal. I covered the mirrors, hid my photos, cleared my desk. I sat in the silent darkness, trying to make my breathing as shallow as possible, trying to become a blank space. The knocking continued for what felt like an eternity. Then it stopped. At sunrise, the building returned to normal. The doors opened. The residents came back, smiling, looking whole. They passed me in the hallway and asked how I slept. I said fine. I lied. Now I leave every night. I set my alarm for 11:55 p.m. I walk until sunrise, no matter the weather, because I know the building notices patterns. And if you stay too long, if you miss too many nights, it will knock. And one day it won't ask permission to come in. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to follow for more.